There are moments in life when a single word no can break you. Rejection is that word. It is sharp, it is cold, and it arrives uninvited. It tells you that you're not good enough, not worthy, not capable. And for a while, you believe it. I've been there. Rejected not just by people, but by circumstances, by life itself. And in those moments I asked myself, why me? Why does life slam the door on the face of those who knock with the purest hopes? But as time passed, I learned something powerful. Rejection is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your strength. It is life's way of whispering, there's something better waiting, but first you must grow. Every rejection I faced pushed me into a corner where I could no longer rely on the world to validate me. I had to validate myself, and that, my friends, is where true power is born. Not when the world says yes to you, but when you say yes to yourself after the world says no. So today, I want to take you through a journey, not of pain, but of transformation, because rejection may look like a wound, but hidden in it is your greatest power. There are certain moments in life that stay with you forever, not because they are full of joy, but because they tear you apart in ways you never expected. You remember the room, the people, the silence that follows a rejection, so loud it echoes inside your soul. And in that stillness, something breaks inside you. I still remember my first major rejection, not the kind where someone just says no and walks away, but the kind that shakes your foundation, the kind that makes you question everything about yourself, your worth, your dreams, your identity. I was full of hope, full of plans, full of belief that I was finally being seen. But in an instant, that hope was dismissed, and the door that I thought would open for me closed with a finality I was not prepared for. I stood there for hours, not physically but emotionally, frozen, replaying that rejection over and over in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. I blamed myself. I doubted myself, and most painfully, I believed the rejection. I believed that maybe I was not enough. Maybe I wasn't meant for the life I had dreamed of. It is in these moments, these vulnerable, raw moments, that we begin to write the wrong story about ourselves. A story built on the opinions of others, on the closed doors, on the times we were told we didn't belong. But something strange happens when you are broken over and over again. Something shifts. In the beginning, you resist it. You try to glue the pieces back, to return to the version of yourself that existed before the rejection. But slowly, quietly, you begin to see that maybe you are not meant to go back. Maybe that version of you was never meant to carry the life you're destined for. Rejection, then, becomes a strange kind of gift, a painful, cruel, but necessary push toward the truth of who you are. When we are accepted, we celebrate, but when we are rejected, we are forced to reflect. We begin to look inward, to ask ourselves questions that are not comfortable but crucial. What do I really want? Why does this rejection hurt so much? Is this truly the end, or is it a redirection? And the more you sit with these questions, the more you realize that rejection is not a wall, it's a mirror. It doesn't just show you how others see you. It shows you how you see yourself, and that's where the power begins. I began to understand that I was giving too much power to the people who rejected me. I let their decisions define my potential. I handed them the pen and let them write chapters of my story. But why? Why do we do that? Why do we let someone else's limited vision of us become the ceiling of what we believe is possible? The truth is, rejection feels so painful not because it ends something, but because it exposes something. It exposes how much we depend on external validation. It exposes how tightly we tie our worth to acceptance, and in that exposure lies the invitation to grow, not by changing ourselves to be accepted, but by embracing who we are in the face of not being chosen. I started to see that every no I had received was not a punishment, but a pause to realign, to reassess, and sometimes to rebuild. Not the broken version of me that needed permission, but the powerful version of me that would create opportunities when doors refused to open. I realized that rejection doesn't shrink us. It reveals the places we've outgrown. It teaches us that sometimes being left out is the best way to be set free. Free from expectations, free from illusions. Free to become who we were always meant to be without needing a seat at a table that was never built for us. So I stopped begging for doors to open. I stopped knocking on places that didn't see my worth. I turned inward. I sat in silence with my fears, with my doubts, with all the broken pieces that rejections had left behind. And in that silence I found a voice that had been waiting for the noise to fade. A voice that didn't ask for approval. A voice that said, "You don't need their yes, you only need your own." That is when rejection transformed from something that wounded me into something that empowered me. And that power, once discovered, can never be taken away. We are raised in a world where approval feels like oxygen. From the moment we begin to speak, we are taught to seek permission. Permission to dream. Permission to act. Permission to exist in the spaces we long to belong to. We wait for nods, for applause, for the comforting words that tell us we are doing well. And when we don't receive those things, when we are met with silence or worse, rejection, it begins to feel like we're not enough. It's subtle at first, but over time, it becomes a voice that follows us everywhere. A voice that says, "Don't try too hard, you'll only be disappointed again." I lived with that voice for a long time. It whispered in the background every time I tried to stand up after being pushed down. It told me to play it safe, to lower my expectations, to stop asking for too much. Because the pain of rejection can become so familiar that it convinces you safety is better than failure. So you shrink, you dim your light, you fold your dreams into corners of your heart where no one can see them. So no one can reject them, but then life has a way of disrupting even our best attempts to hide. It brings people, moments, and circumstances that challenge the stories we tell ourselves, and I met one such moment when I least expected it. I had convinced myself that maybe this time, maybe this opportunity would be the one that said yes. I had done everything right. I had prepared, I had hoped, I had dared to believe, but the answer was still no, and not just a no, but the kind of no that feels personal. The kind of no that isn't just about what you do, but who you are. That day, something inside me broke again, but this time something else woke up too. In the aftermath of that rejection, I sat alone. Not physically, but emotionally. Surrounded by people who didn't see the storm I was fighting within. And in that solitude, a question formed. What if I stopped begging for validation? What if I stopped chasing the people, titles, and achievements that I thought would prove my worth? What if rejection wasn't trying to destroy me, but trying to redirect me? This question changed everything. It made me look back at all the moments I had been rejected before, not with pain, but with clarity. Suddenly I saw patterns. I saw how every rejection had actually saved me. From jobs that would have drained my soul, from people who only loved the version of me that served their needs, from opportunities that looked golden on the outside, but were empty within, I began to understand that rejection was not punishment, it was protection. It was the universe's way of saying, "This is not where your power lies," and slowly I started to honor that. I stopped taking every closed door as a sign of failure. I stopped letting someone's inability to see my light convince me that I had none. I started looking inward and asking myself, where do I still seek permission? Where do I still rely on approval to move forward? And the answers were not easy. They were uncomfortable, but they were honest. I realized I had given so much of my power away, not because others had taken it, but because I didn't believe I deserved to hold it. So I began a new practice. Every time I was rejected, I would pause and say thank you. Not because it didn't hurt, it always hurt, but because I trusted that this pain was purposeful. That maybe I wasn't being pushed away, but being pushed forward, towards something more aligned with who I truly am. And with every no I received, I learned to trust my own yes. The yes to trying again, the yes to showing up even when I was scared, the yes to choosing myself even when the world didn't. Rejection started to become a compass. Not one that told me where to go, but one that told me where I didn't belong, and that was just as important. It gave me freedom. The freedom to stop chasing things not meant for me. The freedom to walk away from places where I had to prove I was worthy. The freedom to build something of my own, on my own terms. And that kind of freedom is fierce. It's the kind that can't be taken away by opinions, by silence, by rejection letters or missed calls. It's the kind of freedom that comes when you finally decide to stop measuring your value by someone else's response. That's when rejection becomes power, not because it gives you control over others, but because it gives you back control over yourself. There comes a time in your journey when you stop asking, "Why did they reject me?" and begin to ask, "What did this rejection awaken in me?" That shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, after many nights of silence, many days of questioning, and countless moments when you look at yourself in the mirror and try to recognize the person staring back. Rejection, when it first meets you, feels like an insult. It feels like a judgment. It feels like someone tearing away a part of your identity and throwing it aside as if it never mattered. But the truth is, rejection has no power over you unless you hand it the meaning. It's not the rejection itself that breaks us. It's the meaning we attach to it. We tell ourselves stories when we are rejected. We say, "Maybe I'm not talented enough. Maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I was foolish to even try." And each time we say it, we believe it a little more. We carry those beliefs into the next opportunity, into the next dream, into the next version of ourselves. And suddenly we start living cautiously, carefully, never too high, never too loud, just safe enough to avoid being rejected again. But in doing so, we reject ourselves before anyone else can. We silence our voice, our passion, our truth, just to stay comfortable. We hide from rejection, not realizing that in hiding, we are also hiding from our greatness. What rejection taught me was something I never expected. It taught me resilience, not the loud kind of resilience that roars, but the quiet, steady kind that rises even when no one is watching. I used to think strength was about holding everything together. But rejection showed me that true strength is about allowing yourself to fall apart without losing the will to rebuild. It's about facing the disappointment, the pain, the self-doubt, and still choosing to move forward. Still choosing to try. Still choosing to believe even when belief feels like the most difficult thing in the world. There were days I would sit with tears in my eyes and wonder if I had anything left to offer. There were nights I would replay every mistake, every missed opportunity, every word I should or shouldn't have said. But each time I got back up, and every time I did, I realized something deeper about myself. I realized that rejection is not a reflection of my value. It's a redirection of my path. And sometimes we need that redirection because we are too focused on what we think we want to notice what we truly need. I began to look at rejection not as something happening to me, but as something happening for me. It wasn't about what I lost, but about what I had yet to find. I discovered gifts within myself I never knew existed. patience, courage, the ability to be alone without feeling lonely, the strength to start again from scratch. These are things no one teaches you in a classroom. You don't learn them from success. You learn them when you've been broken and still decide to rise. The world celebrates acceptance, but it is in rejection where we meet our raw, unpolished selves. It is where masks fall off. It is where we stop pretending and start asking real questions. Who am I without applause? Who am I without the title, the approval, the attention? Do I still matter? And if the answer is yes, and it always is, then that is where your true power lies. In the unwavering belief that your value does not decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. It is often through rejection that our identity is shaped. When people tell us we don't fit, we learn to define ourselves outside their expectation. When doors close, we learn to build new ones. When we're told we're not enough, we dig deep and find that we are more than enough. We are more than anyone could ever define. Rejection strips away the noise. It forces us to face ourselves, to choose ourselves, to honor ourselves even when no one else does. And that kind of honor becomes the foundation of unshakable confidence. Not the kind that needs validation, but the kind that knows its own worth, no matter the circumstance. When I started to see rejection not as a failure but as a refining fire, everything changed. It was no longer about proving people wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise no matter what. And once you know that once you've stood in the ashes of a dream and built something stronger, you are no longer afraid of rejection. Because you understand that rejection does not mean you are not worthy. It simply means there is a better alignment, a deeper truth, a greater purpose that you are being called to discover through the very path you didn't choose. There is a moment after enduring rejection after rejection when something inside you changes. At first it's so subtle you hardly notice it. You still feel the sting, the ache of being told you're not the right fit, not ready, not what they're looking for. You still cry behind closed doors. You still replay the words, the expressions, the moments of silence where you had hoped to hear encouragement, but were instead met with indifference or dismissal. But somewhere in the midst of that pain, you begin to build something stronger than hope. You begin to build belief, not the kind of belief that depends on whether others choose you, but the kind that grows even when they don't. That kind of belief comes from looking at everything you've survived and realizing you are still standing. Still breathing, still dreaming, still trying, and that is not weakness. That is power. Rejection may bend you, but it does not have to break you. In fact, the bending is necessary. It softens the parts of you that are rigid with ego, pride, and expectation. It teaches you humility. It teaches you that no matter how talented, intelligent, or deserving you may be, not everything will go your way. And that's okay, because life isn't just about arriving. It's about becoming. I used to think that success was measured by how many people said yes to you. But over time, I've come to understand that true success is measured by how many times you can be told no and still move forward. It's about how many times you can be pushed away and still rise with grace, with purpose, with fire in your heart. That fire doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from walking through rejection and deciding you will not let it define you. You will let it refine you. There's a kind of wisdom that only rejection can teach. It teaches you what matters most to you, what you're willing to fight for, what you refuse to give up on even when others tell you to let go. Rejection clarifies. It strips away the illusions. It helps you see what you truly value, not because it gives you answers, but because it forces you to ask better questions. Why do I want this? Who am I trying to prove this to? What does success look like to me? Not to the world, but to me. These are the questions that started echoing inside me every time I faced rejection. And with each answer, I got closer to my truth. I stopped chasing things that looked impressive but didn't align with my soul. I stopped running after validation and started walking slowly toward fulfillment. I stopped trying to be chosen and started choosing myself. Rejection, in its own twisted way, became a compass, not one that pointed to where I should go, but one that showed me where I didn't belong. And that was just as important. I began to see that every no I had received wasn't a rejection of who I was. It was a protection of who I was becoming. Life was not shutting doors to punish me. Life was redirecting me to places I couldn't have imagined, places I wouldn't have dared to enter if the original plans had worked out. Rejection was teaching me to let go of control, to trust the detours, to surrender to something greater than my limited understanding. People often say, rejection is redirection. And while that's true, it's not always a straight road. It's winding, confusing, filled with stops and starts. It tests your patience, your endurance, your belief. But if you keep going, if you dare to continue walking even with a heavy heart, you begin to find pieces of yourself you never knew were missing. You begin to meet a version of you that is stronger, braver, more grounded, more authentic. A version of you that no longer fears rejection, because you've learned that your value does not decrease just because someone else cannot see it. Rejection will visit you again and again in this life. It will wear different faces. It will show up in relationships, in careers, in dreams that don't come to life the way you imagined. But each time it comes, you'll be better prepared. Not because you'll be numb to the pain, but because you'll be more familiar with the truth. The truth that rejection is not the opposite of success. It is part of the journey toward it. It is not a block. It is a bridge. It leads you inward toward your own power, your own voice, your own sense of worth that cannot be taken away by any no in the world. So now, when I hear the word rejection, I no longer hear you're not enough. I hear this is not your path. I hear there's something greater waiting for you. I hear rise higher. Rejection has taught me what applause never could, that my worth is not something the world gives me. It is something I carry within me. You see, rejection will always exist. It will come in the form of people, opportunities, circumstances, but how we respond, that is where our power lies. You can let it define you, confine you, or you can let it shape you into someone unshakable. Someone who no longer waits to be chosen, because they have already chosen themselves. So to anyone who has been told they don't belong, who has been turned away, overlooked, dismissed, remember this: every no you hear is not a door closing on your destiny. It's a challenge to grow into it. Let rejection awaken the fire within you. Let it polish the diamond you are becoming. Let it remind you that you were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand out. You are not broken by rejection. You are built by it. Let it strengthen you. Let it shape you. Let it set you free, because in the end, rejection doesn't reduce your power. It reveals it.